Hey, there's a lot of podcasts out there, but there's only one at the root of it all. That is the root of all success with the real Jason Duncan. My name's Glenn Lundy, husband to one, father to 8, and the greatest speaker in America. And I can tell you the conversation that Jason and I just had is going to make a massive impact in your life. So get in here, enjoy it. It's going to be amazing. The root of all success, the real Jason Duncan, and me, Glenn Lundy.
Welcome to the root of all success with the real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs unlocked success and how their stories can help you do the same. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason has built multi-million-dollar businesses that have been featured in Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur magazine. His life's mission now is helping entrepreneurs live what he calls #the exit lifestyle. Introducing TEDx speaker, mastermind leader, author, entrepreneur, cigar aficionado, motorcycle enthusiast, and host of The Root of All Success, the real Jason Duncan. The real Jason Duncan.
Welcome back to another episode. I am your host, the real Jason Duncan, and I have the winner of last year's Great American Speak Off, Glenn Lundy, as a guest on the show. Let me tell you about who this guy is. And I love doing shows like this because I get to meet people that I would have never otherwise come across in my daily life. Truth be told, I was one of the judges on that Great American Speak Off. Had no idea I'd ever get to meet this guy in person, but here we are. Well, not in person. Like he's where he is. He's in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. We're doing this through the internet on Riverside. By the way, big shout out to Riverside. They're not a sponsor, but I use their stuff, and they do a really good job, like those guys. But Glenn Lundy is a highly accomplished individual and entrepreneur, also a very good speaker. So good that he won. I don't know how many people were in that competition, but there were a lot. There are 4 finalists that I got to vote on. But great dude. He's dedicated 25 years of his life to the automotive industry. And he's built a reputation as a respected professional in that field. And so this idea of what a used car salesman is not Glenn Lundy. Whatever you picture that is not this guy. He's a little different than that. He's an author. He's written several books sharing his knowledge about how to be successful, not just in the automotive space, but in life. He's going to be talking about his newest book today that he just released this year on Super Bowl Sunday. He's a devoted husband and a proud father of 8 children. So I'm sure that will come up because there's not too many people I know that have 8 kids. I do have people in my life that have 5, 6, 7, and I know somebody has 8, but not very many people have that many children. But in addition to his successful career, he's also the founder of something called the 800% Elite Automotive Club, which is a membership-based organization for people in the automotive space, which I actually have some questions about that. And he hosts a daily morning show called Rise and Grind, #Rise and Grind, where he shares his knowledge to help people all around the world do something he calls unlock their full potential. And you can find him at glennlundy.com, GLENNLUNDY.com. But I want to welcome Glenn Lundy to the root of all success. Hey, Glenn.
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate you so much.
Well, I am really, really honored to meet you in person after hearing you on stage, and then really not even making the connection until just now. I was like, oh, crap. I was a judge. It was so long ago. I kind of forget. We were talking pre-show about it, but it's cool to have you here. And good job. Good. Tell me a little bit about that experience. What was that experience like to go through all the rounds to get to the final?
Yeah, it was wild, right? Because 27,000 people registered for the Great American Speak Off, the first one. So they just did their second one recently, and 27,000 people signed up for the first one. And when I saw it in my Facebook feed, I just thought, what the heck is Grant selling now? Right? Like, what is Grant doing?
Which is an appropriate response if you see Grant, right?
Like, what is Grant selling this time, man? And I was interested, though. I was intrigued. And so I literally signed up just to see what Grant was doing. What is he doing with this thing? I didn't really think much of it at the time. And so round 1 was a virtual. They also did live auditions, but I was in the virtual. And I was at home with my 8 kids. My wife was running around. I don't even know where she was. And I was just kind of plugged in, listening to what they were doing, had the headphones in, cleaning up around the house. And then they were like, all right, Glenn Lundy, you're up. I was like, oh, crap. And so I had to do a 1-minute keynote. And so I'm literally standing in my front room with my phone, and I just give a 1-minute keynote. And then fast forward a few hours, they passed me through the next round and said I needed to do a 2-minute. So I actually set up a halo light and, set up the phone. I actually did that legit. And from there, they put me in the top 150, which went to Miami for live competition. And then we spent 2 days doing 1-minute and 2-minute and 3-minute keynotes. And then I made the final 4, which took me to the GrowthCon stage where you were a judge, which is super cool. And the final 4 got to perform on the GrowthCon stage, and I won the whole freaking thing, bro. Crazy.
Wow. So your 1-minute first keynote speech that you did in the living room, what was that talk about?
So on the 1 minute, I talked about homelessness. I started off, I said, the worst part about being homeless is not that you don't have money in your pocket or a place to lay your head, but it's the fact that you become invisible. No one will make eye contact with you. They'll look above you, below you, to the left of you, to the right of you, but no one will ever look directly at you. And no one ever says your name. There's so much power in a name. And so I just kind of went down that path real quick for 60 seconds, and it seemed to hit and resonate with the judges.
So how do you have that experience with homelessness?
Yeah, so I was homeless in San Diego, California. I was homeless for a season of my life. It was kind of a big transitional season for me. The homelessness led to a deep depression. Depression led to suicidal thoughts. Suicidal thoughts led to an attempt on my own life. And clearly I was unsuccessful, or this would be the craziest podcast you've ever done.
Yeah, nobody's come back from the dead to do this show.
Yeah, came back from the dead to be on the route of all success with the real Jason Duncan. But yeah, so I went through a season, man. I went through a season, and luckily for me, God plucked me out of that particular season, whispered some powerful words into my ear that completely transformed everything for me. Those words were a very simple sentence. You take yourself wherever you go. You take yourself wherever you go. And when I heard it, I didn't really, understand exactly what it meant, but I started to look at my life, and I started to realize that I had lived in many different cities. I had different friend circles. I had had all these different jobs, and yet the result of my life kept being the same, which was broke, alone, in and out of jail, depressed, drugs. Like the result just kept being the same. And so once I realized you take yourself wherever you go, I was the only constant in all of those environments and all of those situations. And so it opened my eyes to this fact, Jason, that we are the catalyst of all things, both good and bad in our lives. We have the ability to create. We are not victims. And that was a life changer for me.
Wow. And how long ago was that? What year was this?
Yeah, so this was back in, so it was 15 years ago. So 2009, I guess that would be.
Yeah. So now 15 years later, removed from that, you can stand on the stage and tell that story. And honestly, I can't connect with it because I've never been homeless, but I connected with the emotion of just what you said when I said, what was that about? You could see, I could feel it. It was visceral because I know it from the other side. I'm the guy who doesn't look at the homeless guy. I'm the guy who doesn't know his name. I'm the guy that wants them to be invisible because I don't want to see them. So when you said that, like I connect with that. So how did you learn how to take this terrible story and turn it into not just a story that you could use to get people's attention, but to connect with people?
Yeah. So identity, right? Identity is a big challenge for all humans, right? We spend our whole lives trying to figure out who we are. And so my homeless experience really like brought that to the top, when no one ever says your name, because our name is the first thing we identify with, right? I remember asking my mom one time when I was young, I said, Mom, how did I know my name? Like, how did you teach me what my name is? And my mom said, well, I don't know. Like when you were a kid, we'd say your name. And at some point you finally responded and you connected that name with you, and you would respond when we said your name, right? And it becomes a part of your identity. And so through the seasons, I've just really experienced a lot. Now that I get to travel and I get to be around a lot of people and speak on stages and so on and so forth, I've realized that everyone at some point in their life has an identity issue or identity crisis, right? Where we don't necessarily know who we are. We're trying to fit this mold or that mold or whatever. And I was able to take that experience in homelessness and say, okay, well, something as simple as a name can help connect people to this idea of identity that everyone experiences, right? So you never experienced homelessness, but my guess is at some point, Jason has asked himself, who am I?
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm using that. What you just talked about is very common. Most people will not make eye contact with somebody homeless, not for any other reason than maybe they're going to ask us for money and it feels weird, or we're afraid we're going to get mugged or some sort of engagement, right? So most people have experienced that. And so I just kind of figured out over the years that if we kind of start with that, lead with that, it ultimately comes down to identity, which everyone can connect with.
Was this the subject of your final talk too that you did on stage?
Yeah. Yeah. So my final talk started with, who are you?
I remember it now,
Three
dude.
words.
I remember it. I wish I wish I'd have connected all this and watched it before, because it was only 3 minutes or
3
something like
minutes.
that, 4 minutes. Like I wish I had watched it to prepare for this, Glenn, but that's a bad host on my part, because I remember it now. I remember that's the first thing you walked out. Were you wearing like a blue blazer or blue shirt or something?
No,
I don't know.
I was wearing my black suit, but I had a golden hex tie. I had a tie just like this, a shiny hex tie.
Okay. So anyway, I remember you kept saying that, because the dude who went before you, there was a problem with the clock. He didn't know when the clock was, because they didn't have all the details worked out, and that kind of interrupted the thing, and you came out and killed it. So I remember it now. I remember it. So what gave you the experience to be able to speak like that? What do you do public speaking otherwise, or was this just something you wanted to try?
Yeah, so combination of things. I've always, I can remember being 5 years old and a teacher asked me, I was a great reader. So the teacher asked me to go into the third grade class. I was in kindergarten, but go in the third grade class and read to the third graders. Right. And I remember how that felt. It felt amazing. It was like my first stage at 5 years old. When I was 11, I was the MC of a talent show. I didn't have any talents. I couldn't be in the talent show, but I could MC the talent show. And I really loved that. Right. First time I ever gave a big speech was at my dad's funeral. I wrote a speech and I was able to just really move the audience. And so I've always been captivated and have been given opportunities now more than ever. I'm speaking at 4 different events here in the next 10 days. But I've always had that ability. But I will tell you this, Jason, I've always been really great at speaking. I was in Greece with my friend Danelle Delgado 5 years ago, I guess it was. And we spent 5 days there. We had all these activities. We were building our businesses. And I crushed it, bro. Like I crushed every day of activities. I was the winner. I was the winner. I was the winner. And so when we went to leave, my friend Danelle Delgado gives me a hug and she says, man, you did so great this week. I said, thank you. And she goes, oh, and by the way, we need to work on your speaking. And I went, what? I'm a speaker. Like I speak well. I have spoke well my entire, like that's where my head went, right? So she plants this seed and now I have 16 hours of travel to get back home. And I'm thinking about what she just said. And I'm like, what would make her say that? And I am so grateful for that moment, because when I got home, dude, every book I could find, every video I could find, I started really studying the art and craft of effective communication and being able to speak and hold a stage and move an audience. And so 10,000 hours, right? It's the 10,000 hours idea of just really putting in the practice to develop the skill. And so I was good, but now I can confidently look at you and say, I've done the work, the hard work that it takes to really be great.
So what does your wife and kids, what do they think about dad being on stage and talking and being on the internet? And like, what do they think about this?
As long as it's just dad, they love it. Every time I put a camera on them, they want to run away. But no, my son and daughter, I have a 14-year-old daughter. I have a 12-year-old son at this point. I also have 6 others, right? But those are the 2 that currently get to travel with me. I take them with me when I go on speaking events. Next week, we're hitting Baltimore, New York, and Miami over a period of 6 days, and they're coming with me for that. And so my daughter loves to be in the room. She loves to learn the lessons. She takes a lot of notes. She carries herself really well. My son has a desire to be either a speaker or a preacher. He's not sure yet, which is, they're both kind of the same thing in different ways. But he has that desire. And it's funny that you say that, because my friend Jenna, I did a speaking event for Drive Centric in St. Louis, Missouri. It's an automotive company. And while I was speaking, he was sitting off to the side, and she mentioned that she looked over and he was word for word saying different parts of the keynote that I was giving, different stories that he's heard again and again and again and again. He's got it down. And so he's been practicing himself. So they love it as long as they don't have to necessarily be involved, except for Savannah and Joel. They're starting to get more involved as they get older.
Nice. So you have really made your name as a speaker now, but your life and your business has been in the automotive business.
Yes,
so tell me how you got started in the automotive business.
So I was working at a place called Sterner and Klein, which was a call center for America Online. Now, for you young people that don't know what America Online is, America Online was the only way you could get online. You had to pay monthly to be able to use the internet. And so not for Wi-Fi, you had to pay for a browser, right? And so I was working at a call center. I would call people that canceled their subscription and try to convince them to take a 6-month free trial of America Online to come back on board. And one day I was sitting in the break room, and there was a classified ad in the newspaper sitting on the table that said, make $5,000 a month guaranteed. And there was a phone number. That's all it said. Make $5,000 a month guaranteed. And there was a phone number. And I was like, dude, I would be the richest man on earth if I could make $5,000 a month, man. This is crazy, because here I am in a call center making, $8 an hour or whatever it was. And so I called it. I scheduled an appointment. I drove to the address that they gave me, and it happened to be a Nissan Subaru dealership in Flagstaff, Arizona, where I grew up. And so I went in. I interviewed with a guy. He hired me on the spot. And fast forward 25 years later, it's been the industry that has been near and dear to my heart, and has given me more opportunities than I could have ever possibly imagined.
So you started out, I'm assuming, selling cars, right?
That's correct.
And so over these 25 years, where did it go? I mean, did you stay with Nissan and Subaru, or did you go to other dealerships? Did you start a dealership? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
As an entrepreneur, I know that you have to deal with sales on a regular basis. I mean, every entrepreneur does. And if you aren't paying attention to sales as an entrepreneur, you're not going to be an entrepreneur for very long. But I've got a sponsor of this show called Dub that helps you bring the personal back to sales. If you want to figure out how to improve content creation, improve client trust, improve your sales process, decrease the sales cycle, because we all know time kills deals. If you want to increase client bookings and increase conversions, you need to take a look at Dub. There's a special offer for Dub for listeners to The Root of All Success at therealjasonduncan.com/Dub. And that's DUBB. What Dub does, I've been using this for years. I'm a huge fan, and I'm so honored that they're our primary sponsor of the podcast. but they have helped over 60,000 businesses around the world communicate better, to make sales easier, to make sales more personal. And Dub is built for growing teams. I mean, you can set up video emails, you can set up custom onboarding, you can do admin reporting, anything you need around video and sales and automation. Dub is there. You can try Dub now. Your conversions to sales are waiting. All you got to do is go to therealjasonduncan.com/dub. And there you're going to get 2 weeks for free to try Dub. Plus, you're going to get 50% off your first 2 months of Dub. You can't beat that. So go check it out. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/dub.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, so I spent 8 years at that dealership. I went from a salesperson to a finance manager, which is the guy that does all the contracting, to a sales manager, so the guy up there at the desk working all the numbers, to a general sales manager. So I was over some other sales managers, and ultimately that's where my career tapped out at that particular dealership. Now, it was interesting, Jason, because my career grew over 8 years, but the company never did. The company was selling the same amount of cars when I started as they were when I was working there 8 years later. And in that season of my life, I was making a lot of poor choices, drinking, drugging, all of these things. It really put a bad taste in my mouth for automotive because I blamed the auto industry for all of the terrible things that were going on outside, right, in my personal life. I had a daughter. I ended up losing custody of my daughter. It was just it was a rough season. So I decided to get out of automotive. I got out of automotive. I had a brilliant idea, Jason. I decided I was going to be a professional poker player, bro. Brilliant idea, right? I was going to move to Vegas. I was going to be a professional poker player. It was going to be amazing. And so I did, man. I moved to Vegas. I took everything that I had. I went all in on the professional poker player thing. And 2 weeks later, I was broke, sitting in my car with no gas in the tank, trying to figure out where I was going to go next. And fast forward, that led to the homeless season that I mentioned earlier. Wow. So after coming out of that, I got an opportunity to, I worked for a company that I was able to travel all over the U.S. And I came across Lexington, Kentucky. And the strangest thing, man, I just felt called to Lexington. I felt more at home in Lexington, Kentucky than I did anywhere else I'd ever been in my entire life. And so I moved to Lexington, Kentucky with $1,500 cash in a suitcase, knew one dude. And I moved out here and I started life over. And the only thing I really knew how to do was sell cars. So I started getting back into the business a little bit, met my wife. And after meeting my wife, we had our first child together. And she was like, bro, if you're going to do this automotive thing, you need to take it seriously. And so I did. So I got a job at a tiny dealership in a tiny town, Paris, Kentucky, population 9,600 people. Started in sales, made my way all the way up to the GM of that store. And instead of the business, only my career growing, we actually grew that business 800%.
Wow.
Yeah. We grew it to become the second largest used car franchise dealership in the United States of America. And so I left there in October of 2018 and decided to start working with more dealerships all around the country, helping them grow 800%. So instead of buying my own store, I now work with over 150 dealerships around the United States and Canada. I work directly with the owners and GMs to help them scale 800%.
And is that 800% automotive club, is that elite automotive club, is that designed to teach sales tactics, or is it more systems for the dealership?
Correct. Yeah. All systems and processes from the top. So we work directly with the owners to help them in three primary areas, which is inventory, marketing, and process, right? How do we create amazing processes for our people? What are our inventory strategies and what are our marketing strategies? Those are the three areas we primarily work.
So when you work with a dealership, all of us, I think listening, with very few exceptions, have had the experience of going to a dealership and buying a car. And there are some dealerships like CarMax that stick to the, hey, this is what the price is. We're not screwing around with it. But most still are this, hey, the price is $42,000. What do you give us? And you kind of go back and forth. What is the average, or is there one, the profit that a dealership makes on a used car? Because I think in a lot of our minds, we think, well, they're making $20,000 on this car, or $10,000 on this car. But then we feel like the used car guy is going, man, I'm losing money on this, man, I'm giving this car away.
Yeah.
Well, we know that's not true. So like, what is the truth about it?
Yeah. So the truth is that margins back in the 80s are completely different than margins in 2024. So the stigmas and stereotypes around automotive come from decades and decades and decades of dealers having large profit margins until the invention of the internet. So now we're in an information age. So people have information. Before, people didn't have information, and a lot of people took advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
But now there's information, and so it's completely changed the game over the last 20 years or so. The game has changed. So a dealer on a good car deal is going to make anywhere from a 4 to 8%, profit. They're going to make 4 to 8% profit on that particular item. So if it's a $40,000 vehicle, they're going to make $2,000 to $4,000, on that particular deal. Whereas back in the day, it used to be anywhere from 16 to 30% that dealers could make in margins. So, ideally, if it's $100,000 vehicle and a dealer can make, $4 or $5 grand on it, I think that's a fair deal. And that's kind of how it operates. So CarMax is a little different situation. Privately, independently owns are a little bit different, and so on and so forth. But that's a rough idea. So anywhere from 4 to 8%.
So you're on the dealer side, so you help the dealers do their deal. So talk to us as consumers. What's one tip that we can all take to go into the next deal? And we want a good deal when we buy a car. What should we be doing to get a good deal on a car?
Yeah, I think the biggest tip that I can give for a consumer is just know what you want and be very, very clear. Like, just be very clear with whoever you're operating with. This is what I want. Because I know that people say that dealers play a lot of games. Bro, customers play a ridiculous amount of games. And
buyers are liars.
It just makes the transaction so much more challenging. Like, What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And let's make this thing happen as quickly as humanly possible. So be honest, be real, tell them what you want, do a little bit of research ahead of time so that you're clear on what it is that you want, and go in and just make the transaction easy, right? Like, I don't ever go into, I don't go into any other industry. I don't go into a restaurant. I might say, what do you think about this steak versus this, versus the chicken? I might ask a quick question, but I'm in there because I'm hungry and I'm looking to eat and I need to get my meal, right? And everybody's very clear on that. Whereas in auto, we play all these games, I'm here to, in my mind, I'm here to buy, but I'm going to tell them I'm here to look. Why, dude? Like, if you're there to get a car, I'm here to get a vehicle to replace what I got now. Here's my wife. Here's my kids. This is our situation. This is what our finances look like. And here's what we know that we're here to do. And then we can make it happen.
So why do you think people are so afraid of being honest at a car dealership?
Because of the stigmas for years and years and years that have been built in the industry. It is completely 800% the fault of the industry. The industry was built where it was so competitive in the sense that each dealer had a market, right? So you had a 6-mile radius, 8-mile radius, and no one could really go anywhere else outside of that because you didn't have internet. So you couldn't go look at what the dealer 2 states over was doing like you can today, right? And so our industry took advantage of that for a long time. They took advantage of people's lack of information. They hired shady characters. Like, we built our own, our own stigmas. We created them ourselves in this industry. I will 800% admit to that. But times have changed drastically. And so now getting the consumer to understand that it's not what it was is probably going to take just as long as it took to create those stigmas to begin with.
How much time do you spend speaking versus doing your 800% elite automotive club? How much time do you split in between those two?
Yeah. So, time is a weird thing. I invest time in lots of different areas in different ways than possibly a lot of people. So I have to be in front of a camera for my clients 2 hours a week. That's it. Now, in order to get in front of that camera 2 hours a week for my clients, there's a ton of research that I invest. There's lots of conversations with manufacturers and what's going on in the industry, so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot of time invested behind the scenes, but it's only 2 hours a week actually in front of my clients. As far as speaking, it's a similar thing, right? There's a lot of work that I invest into being a great speaker, making sure I understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how we're doing it, and what's going on in the world today. And this company that has just hired me to speak at their event, what do I need to know about that company and their audience and their people? So there's a lot of time that's invested in that. But time on stage is, it's a 45-minute keynote. It might be a 3-minute travel for a 45-minute keynote. So I do a lot of both. I try to travel 100 days a year or so for different speaking events. And then I'm in the office all the time. When you own your own business, you're in the office all the time.
So are you getting calls all the time now that you won that contest to speak?
The contest really, I was doing a good amount of speaking gigs before I won the Great American Speak Off. I have not necessarily picked up any speaking gigs directly from the Great American Speak Off. But I can tell you that it has helped me as far as my confidence. It has helped me really lean in on this skill. Like, obviously, this is something that I can run with. And my speaker fees have gone up drastically.
Good for you. Supply and demand, maybe. Supply and demand.
Hey, that's exactly right. There's only one greatest speaker in America.
That's right. Well, tell us a little bit about your books. You've written several books, but you have a new one that just came out. So, and you held it up just a second ago. Tell us a little bit about your new book.
Yeah. So this book here, this is the Legacy Titles, 12 Proven Principles to Grow Your Business 800%. And this book, I wrote it parable style. It's the story of Alfred Smith. Alfred Smith is a 3rd-generation car dealer. And at the beginning of the book, he's feeling like he's got more potential, but he just doesn't know how to quite tap into it. And so Alfred's grandfather passes away. And after he passes away, he leaves him a chest. And in the chest, there are 12 old car titles. And each car title has a different principle. And so the principles are the morning 5. Focusing on your goals, not the goals set by others, right? Promoting from within, something we call the 8531 formula. So there's these 12 principles that the book goes into. And Alfred goes through and applies each of these principles in his business and ultimately grows his dealership 800%, right? So it's a combination of the principles and experiences that I had at that small dealership in out here in Kentucky. But I put it in the style of a parable so it can be fun to read. It's entertaining. There's characters, there's story, and there's tons of takeaways that you can apply in your life, whether you're a business owner, an aspiring business person, anybody who wants their career to take off can really get an advantage from this book.
All right. So I want to get a copy of that. I am really interested in that style of writing. And I'm also interested in the concepts that you're talking about there. So it's called the Legacy Titles. Yep. Where can people pick up a copy of that book?
So you can go to Amazon, type in the Legacy Titles in Amazon. You can go to glennlundy.com. There's a link right there for my website where you can grab it that way. There's also an Audible version, Jason. I don't know if you do. Do you do Audibles at all?
All the time.
So we created the Audible version, and I wanted to create an audio experience unlike anything anybody had ever experienced before. And so I brought 2 of my friends in, both podcasters. We sat right over here in my studio. I read the book, the Legacy Titles. After each chapter, my friends asked questions about what they had just heard. So we dug in deeper, kind of like what David Goggins did with his book, Can't Hurt Me, in the Audible. We dug in deeper. And then I had a sound engineer go through and find key points throughout the story and actually do some sound engineering. So there's one part where Alfred is on stage. He's giving a speech at his grandfather's funeral, and you literally hear like the echo of the room. You hear him tap the mic when he walks up. You hear the audience like laugh at different points in the speech. And so we created an audio experience that's incredibly immersive. I'm super proud of it, dude. It's the most fascinating audio experience you will have ever had.
Is it anywhere other than Audible, or is it other places where you can get the audio
Audible
version?
and iTunes.
Okay, gotcha. So you've been very successful in the automotive business. You've been very successful as a speaker. What do you think is your one key? If you had to narrow it all down to one thing that's made you so successful in these arenas of life, what is that one key to success?
Man, if I had to narrow it down to one thing, I would say the one thing that has made me successful in a lot of areas of life is that I have the ability, because of the way I grew up, which I touched on in my keynote that you saw, that you voted for me when I
That's
won.
right.
I touched on it in there. I grew up mixed, right? So my dad is black. My mom is white. They got divorced when I was 11 years old. My dad, who is black, remarried a black woman. My mom, who is white, remarried a white dude. And then they ended up moving into the same apartment complex just 2 doors down from each other. So I grew up in an all black house at dad's house, apartment 30, and an all white house at mom's house in apartment 28. And at the time, it was super challenging as a kid because I had no idea where I fit in, right? I had a ton of identity issues. But now looking back, it's this experience that has allowed me to see and understand multiple perspectives of life. I can step in somebody else's shoes. And so by stepping in someone else's shoes, I understand how an audience experiences a keynote. And it helps me become a better speaker because I see it not from my eyes on the stage, but from their eyes in the audience. When it comes to growing businesses, I understand my client's perspective and their point of view. So I've built my business to make sure that I'm serving my clients from the way they want to be served, not necessarily the way my eyes see the world. It's the same in my marriage. It's the same with my kids. This ability to step in someone else's shoes and not just see the world the way they see it, but seek to understand the way they see it would probably be my biggest gift and the reason I've been able to be so successful in multiple different areas.
How do you define that word success? What is Glenn Lundy's definition?
I would define the word success as progress. When we are when you are moving forward towards a goal, a dream, a vision, a financial future, a faithful understanding, a relational target or goal, progress is the key that I define success as. It's not a finish line. It's knowing that we're getting a little bit better every single day.
So by that definition, do you consider yourself to be a successful person?
I do consider myself a successful person in a lot of ways because right now I'm learning to play the drums, bro, 18 minutes a day, learning this new skill of playing the drums. And I get a little bit better each day, right? I'm studying my keynotes. I'm building a relationship now with a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old and a 7-year-old. His birthday's today, and a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And next year, I'll be building a relationship with a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old because every single year it's different. So yeah, man, success is something that I feel I have aligned myself with because I'm always getting better every single day.
So if you had to reach out there and with your inner motivational speaker, who you are, and you had to give one piece of advice to an entrepreneur listening to this show, and it can't be the ability to see multiple perspectives because you've already talked about that. But if you had to give one piece of advice to an entrepreneur who wants to be successful, what is that one piece of advice that Glenn Lundy would give?
The biggest piece of advice that I could give to anyone who wants to be successful is that get super clear on who you are. Be as authentic as humanly possible to yourself. Honor the dreams, the visions, the goals, the gifts, the talents, and the skills that you uniquely have. Hone that craft. Hone that craft. Hone that craft. Don't be a mirror of someone else. Don't try to emulate or be something that you're not. Understand clearly who you are and bring that light to the world.
Wow. That's good stuff, man. That is
Thanks,
good stuff.
brother.
All right, everybody. I want you to check out Glenn Lundy, glennlundy.com. It's GLENNLUNDY.com. Pick up a copy of his new book, The Legacy Titles. I love the way he's written it in story form. I did a similar thing with my book, Exit Without Exiting. I told the story of 3 different entrepreneurs. And I don't know if this is experienced the way you had it, but when I wrote the book, I did not write it as a story. I just wrote it as information. Yep. And then I finished it and read it. And I said, this sucks. Nobody's ever going to read this book. And so I went back. I spent 6 more months coming up with characters to tell the story. So I love it.
Hilarious, dude. That is hilarious. I wrote the principles of this book down 5 years ago, and they sat on the shelf for 4.5 years because every time I'd look at it, I was like, that is boring, bro. Ain't nobody going to read that. It's so boring. And finally figured out the parable style, and I wrote the book in 4 months.
Well, I love it, and I do want to get a copy of that. I am going to be a reader of The Legacy Titles by Glenn Lundy. Glenn, it's been such an honor to have you on the show. I love your energy. I love your passion. I love your enthusiasm. I love what you're pouring into your kids. It's an admirable thing to see a father do this for his children, to say, look, I'm going to show you, I'm going to tutor you, I'm going to mentor you into something that you may or may not want to do, but you're going to watch your dad do it, and you're going to see how he can succeed at it. So I congratulate you on being a good dad. Congratulations on the overcoming of all the challenges you went through and the success that you have experienced. I'm going to give you the last word on the show today. Anything you want to say to the listeners or to me before we sign off today?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, man. I truly appreciate you investing in time in us having this conversation. Just gratitude through the roof. It's not something I ever take for granted. There's a trillion places you could have been today, and you chose to be here with me. So thanks, Jason, and same to you, all the listeners out there. Trillion things you could have listened to. You decided to ride with me and the real Jason Duncan, and I greatly appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Glenn, for being on the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Another successful entrepreneur and his journey to success. I mean, listen, this guy's story is pretty phenomenal, going through homelessness based on choices that he made. I mean, he decided, look, I'm going to give up the car business because it's leading to places I don't want to go. I'm going to put it all in on poker, and I'm going to become a millionaire poker player. Well, obviously that didn't work out. And that led to a place where he had to make decisions. What am I going to do for the rest of my life? And I think it's also admirable for him to just choose, I'm going to start over somewhere. And Lexington, Kentucky is a pretty good place to start. If you've ever been there, beautiful horse country, the racing horses and the beautiful rolling hills. So he's in a good place. And now look what he's built: a successful family, a successful business, and a successful speaking career, winning the Great American Speak Off. And I happen to be a judge. Now I got to go back and watch this speech again, because I remember it well. And he asked me before a show, did you vote for me? And I honestly said I didn't remember. But the longer we've had this conversation, I'm 99% sure that he got my number one vote, because there were 4 people and I had to vote all 4. I'm almost certain, because I do remember his speech more than I remember any of the others. So anyway, Glenn, big thanks for him being on the show today. And thank you, listener, for tuning into this. I love doing these shows. This has been one of the most enjoyable conversations I've had on the show in a while. And I'm very glad that you sat in with me and were able to listen to this conversation that Glenn and I had. I want you to make sure that you're subscribed to this and you left a review if you like this show, because that makes the show get put in front of more people. And if you're not watching on YouTube, go to youtube.com/TheRealJasonDuncan and subscribe so that you can get these episodes every time they're released. And right now I'm releasing 2 a week. So there's a lot to listen to, a lot of great conversations. Tune in again next time when I talk with yet another very successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. Until then, as always, I'm the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Attention business owners. Attention business owners. Feeling burnout from running your business? Uncertain if you're nearing burnout? Take our free 10-question business burnout test at businessburnouttest.com to discover where you stand. With just 10 quick questions, you'll learn how to immediately begin making changes to regain freedom and success. cut your daily operations time in half, improve your quality of life, and prepare your business for your future exit without losing revenue or profit. Visit businessburnouttest.com now and take the test. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.